just received in our and further details of this continuing story. Just received in our this is the latest dispatch just received in our news.
Hello, and welcome again to the Clapback. And no, this is not a show about what police do when black people reach for their wallet. This is the only news show that doesn't talk about the news. We talk to the news. And then we sing the new national anthem for defunding the police.
You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing.
Now, anyone who has watched this show knows that we focus a lot on issues of race, but this week's show is dedicated to all the people who have disproportionately fallen prey to the global pandemic that is disproportionately affecting one of America's greatest groups of people.
Selena Gomez, Casey Musgraves, Lorde, and many other female musicians also use their platforms to demand change and reach out to fans, urging them to take action. Ariana Grande shared with fans photos she took while participating in a peaceful protest in West Hollywood.
We need a voice against racism. We need many voices against racism and against brutality. We need to stand up and say that Black Lives Matter.
Wait, that last guy looked like Utah Senator Mitt Romney, but I'm sure it's probably a lookalike or something. Everyone knows Mitt Romney doesn't talk like that when people ask him about Trump's racist comments.
Would you go as far as to say racist comments?
That's all I got. Thanks.
Okay.
All right, take care.
But over the past 2 weeks, the people who are responsible for keeping the wraparound sunglasses industry afloat have managed to catch a very interesting communicable disease. The woke virus, which attacks the white privilege receptors and causes white people to speak out against police brutality and racism, including some of the people and brands you'd least expect, like Starbucks, who recently changed their policy against black malingerers and tweeted this. See, they wanted to create a more inclusive world, just like ESPN, who fired an employee for standing against racism and now says they stand against racism and stand up for their African-American colleagues. Even NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who blackballed Colin Kaepernick for peacefully protesting against police brutality, just try saying that 3 times, said this.
We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the National Football League, believe Black Lives Matter.
I'm sorry. Wait, Jeremy. I thought we were going to play the part of the clip where he spoke about Colin Kaepernick, like used his name. Oh, he didn't? Oh, that can't be right. Keep looking. Anyway, it wasn't just brands, companies, and celebrities. Regular schmegular white folks have joined in to protest around the world against police brutality, proving that we get to finally live in a post-racial America. We did it. We did it. Racism is dead, right? I mean, if white people are going to stand with us on issues of race, then, and they're going to say Black Lives Matter, then racism is dead. It's over. In fact, today's opening clap is to all the white anti-racists out there who stand alongside us in solidarity. White people for Black lives. Dear white people, first, I want to thank you. And I don't mean this sarcastically. For years, black people have fought against systematic racism while you guys have focused on more important things.
Brewing backlash, fans of Sean Hannity are smashing their Keurig coffee machines after Keurig pulled its ads from Hannity's show.
Nike's controversial endorsement of Colin Kaepernick is reigniting the debate over NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem. Some critics are destroying their Nike-branded gear.
This morning, a decision by Starbucks to use a minimalist design for its signature holiday cup is stirring up a little bit of a debate. Some evangelical Christians are very upset that the coffee giant is doing away with symbols of the season like the snowflakes, the snowmen, and the other kind of ornaments.
This year's design is just a plain red cup. It doesn't give me like the, wow, it's Christmas, you know what I mean?
The topic percolated on social media, where evangelical groups accuse the company of waging a war on Christmas.
Do you realize that Starbucks wanted to take Christ and Christmas off of their brand new cups? That's why they're just plain red.
Thankfully, you finally agree that black lives are more important than snowman lives. And I'm not even kidding. I truly believe that racism will never be behind us until white people are willing to stand up and speak out. So if this is the start of that, then I want to beg white people not to leave this movement once it's like not cool anymore or no longer trending on social media. But my dear white allies, I have to warn you about one thing. This is the easy part. See, my woke friends, it's easy to watch a man get lynched in broad daylight and call for police accountability. What's harder is to work toward dismantling the system of white supremacy that causes and perpetuates these problems. First, we have to ask ourselves, why do police patrol black communities so much? Well, the answer is obvious, because that's where the crime is, right? Well, not so fast, my Caucasian friends. See, I know you're told that black people disproportionately commit more crimes, which is true. Now that stat comes from data from arrests. It's FBI data. But many of the people arrested for crimes are eventually exonerated, and the vast majority of crimes go unsolved. But police still use these statistics to justify why they patrol black areas more heavily and use more force against black people. But if they patrol black areas more heavily, wouldn't that mean they were more likely to find more black criminals? For instance, police have known for 25 years that blacks and whites use and sell drugs at the same rate. If you exclude marijuana, white people actually use more drugs if it's not marijuana. Black people are 6.5 times more likely to be arrested for drug use. And that's because police often patrol black areas for drugs. Numerous studies have shown this to be true. Take San Francisco, for instance. According to a lawsuit filed by the ACLU, for years, the city's police department's undercover unit only targeted black drug dealers, even though the city is only 6% black. And it's not just drugs. A Stanford research project looked at 200 million traffic stops, and they found that black drivers were 1.5 to 2 times more likely to be stopped by police and 2 to 4 times more likely to be searched than whites. And here's the thing about that study. It found that white people were actually more likely to be in possession of contraband. And let's not even talk about stop and frisk. In 2011, the New York Police Department stopped and frisked more black men under the age of 25 than there were in the entire city. And 90% were innocent. The Bureau of Justice Statistics shows that police were twice as likely to use force on black and Hispanic men. And that's why black neighborhoods are high crime areas. Because for the most part, police only look for crimes in black neighborhoods. And this is also why police disproportionately kill more black people, because that's who they stop and that's who they interact with and that's who they investigate and that's who they feel threatened by. So white people, if you really want to stop disproportionate police brutality, here's what y'all got to do. You don't have to commit more crimes. You already do that. You already kill more police officers. You just got to start telling police when you commit crime. If you want to smoke some meth or snort some cocaine, white people do that more often. Actually, the statistics show that. Do it in front of the police station. Even though white people murder people at the same rate as black people murder people, you gotta start talking more about white on white crime. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but y'all said y'all wanted to help, right? When people paint the police as racist, it's only natural that there's some pushback. Police will say this.
George Floyd isn't the only black American who was killed by police. In fact, black Americans are killed by police at more than twice the rate of white Americans. An Axios Ipsos poll found 77% of whites say they trust local police, compared with 36% of African Americans. Do you think there is a problem with systemic racism in policing in the United States?
I do not think that we have a systemic racism problem with law enforcement officers across this country.
Do you believe there is systemic racism in law enforcement?
I think there's racism in the United States still, but I don't think that the law enforcement system is systemically racist.
And they're right. According to the current definition of racism, police departments across the country as a whole aren't racist. It's white supremacy. See, most people have the erroneous idea that white supremacy is like some supercharged form of racism when, in truth, racism and white supremacy are two entirely different things. Racism is a belief, while white supremacy is a system built in part on racism. If only there was someone who could inform the world about this fact. Now, it's probably going to have to be a black woman because, you know, whenever shit needs to get done, you just call up a black woman. But who?
The dictionary defines racism as a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Mitchum said that definition was too simple and too surface level.
I basically told them that they need to include that there's a systematic oppression upon a group of people. It's not just, oh, I don't like someone. It's a system of oppression. It's a system of disadvantages for a certain group of people.
After a few back and forth emails, the editorial board of Merriam-Webster Dictionary agreed, writing back, "This revision would not have been made without your persistence in contacting us about this problem. We sincerely thank you for repeatedly writing in and apologize for the harm and offense we have caused in failing to address the issue sooner."
I told y'all. And Kennedy is right. Racism can't be confined to what people believe in their heart. Actions and their results are what determine whether or not something is racist, not belief or intent. And neither has anything to do with hate or intent. White supremacy is bigger than that. It's not defined by tiki torch marches or moonlit cross burnings. That is racial terrorism, which is also a byproduct of racism. White supremacy is an institution. It's systematic and it's entrenched. It manifests itself in everything from education to criminal justice, but white supremacy is largely invisible. So, allow me to give you a few examples. Racism is believing that black people are thugs when FBI data shows that 99.9% of black people don't commit crime in any given year. But white supremacy is stopping, frisking, pulling over, searching, investigating, and arresting more black people than whites. If you've ever wondered, but what about black on black crime? You might be a white supremacist. Now, racism is when white people perceive black men to be bigger and stronger than white men of similar size. White supremacy is when the cops use more force on black people, even though white people resist more and white people kill more cops. So if you've ever used the phrase, "He should have just followed orders and complied," you might be a white supremacist. Racism is when cops kill more black men. White supremacy is that cops who take the lives of black men are more likely to avoid charges, and if they are charged, they're more likely to be exonerated. So if you ever use the phrase "all lives matter," you might be a white supremacist. Racism is when white women dial 911 and wait for a nigga to do something. White supremacy is black men receiving 20% longer sentences than whites who commit the same crimes. So, if you've ever said, "I don't feel uncomfortable, maybe I should call 911, you might be a white supremacist. This is racism.
Don't get that. Don't hit him with that fucking stick, yo. Oh my goodness, get your fucking, oh my God, get your, ow! No! Please stop. What the? Back up. No, I can't breathe. I'm on the ground.
Why y'all beating him?
Big fucking friend, shoot it again.
But this is white supremacy.
We don't condone Minneapolis. We roundly reject what he did as disgusting. It's disgusting. It's not what we do. It's not what police officers do.
And if you ask Derek Chauvin why he thought it was necessary to kneel on a man's neck, he wouldn't say racism or white supremacy. He'd just point to his badge and say,
Yeah, that's how the fuck I act. Naturally. Ask anybody who know me.
So, what are the solutions? Now, my first suggestion is to put the "you're about to lose your job" lady in charge of the Justice Department and have her go around the country telling cops,
You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Get this dance. You about to lose your job because you are detaining me for nothing.
okay, I've just been informed that she might have a hard time getting confirmed by the Senate. Well, my second suggestion is that we should defund the police. Now, I know that many of you think that phrase means eliminating cops altogether, but the actual definition of defund means to withdraw funding from. And I know that sounds radical, but it doesn't mean that we'll just stop enforcing the law altogether. Remember when they defunded the program that printed paper food stamps? It's not like the whole thing ended. They just realized that paper food stamps were obsolete after Old Dirty Bastard died. I'm pretty sure that's what happened, right? When we abolished the War Department in 1947, did we totally stop going to war? Or when we defunded the Department of Prohibition, it was mostly because a lot of black men didn't know what to do with their pocket change if they couldn't put it in a Crown Royal bag. But it was also because, just a little bit, because we realized that stopping people from drinking was a terrible idea. And the way we police right now is a terrible idea. So, what do we do with the money? Well, we use some of it to teach cops and regular white people about inherent bias and implicit bias, so they won't have the perception that black people commit more crime. Secondly, we can't address police reform without addressing health disparities, housing, unemployment, and economics. The average white family has $1 for every dime a black family owns. Where do you think they get all those boat shoes from? Third, we have to erase the white supremacy in the education system. On average, majority white school districts get $2,226 per student more than non-white school districts. And when we use those funds to address problems like mental health, addiction, education inequality, and economics, every bit of sociological research and data tells us that crime will fall. And if crime falls, we don't need as many police officers. And if we don't have as many police officers, they won't kill as many people. And that's why we have to defund the police. Now, you gotta admit, that was smart as fuck, right? Well, okay, I gotta confess. I didn't think of any of these ideas. In fact, none of the activists, protesters, and smart motherfuckers out there marching and calling for change came up with these proposals. That entire list I read to you came from reports that were commissioned by agencies dating back to 100 years ago. These reports had nothing to do with crime. They were reports that were commissioned after some of the largest and deadliest riots in history, and they all had to do with police violence. After the 1919 race riot in Chicago, they called it a riot. A study of race relations found that inequality and, quote, the economic factor is an important cause of vice and crime. And that came from the Negro in Chicago. It continued to say that the Negro will be debited with all the crime he commits, while figures for other groups will not indicate the full extent of their criminality because of, quote, the disposition, conscious or unconscious, to arrest Negroes more freely than whites, to book them on more serious charges, to convict them more readily, and to give them harsher sentences. Did I mention that this shit was written 100 years ago? Now, in 1935, after a police brutality in Harlem turned violent, the mayor's report, The Negro in Harlem, they should really come up with some better names. That report cited the need to improve policing along with healthcare, housing, disproportionate school funding, employment discrimination, and maternal mortality. It said there has been no systematic and comprehensive effort to modify these agencies to serve the needs of the present community. And, quote, the show of force only tends to make the conditions which were responsible for the occurrence more irritating. And so as long as these conditions persist, no one knows when they will lead to a recurrence with possibly graver consequences. And nothing changed. It happened again in 1965. After the Watts riots, the California Governor's Commission made 3 recommendations. 1, employment for the Negro community who are unemployed and able to work is a first priority. And in education, they wanted to recommend a costly approach to eliminating disparities in school funding. And the third thing was to recommend that law enforcement agencies place a greater emphasis on their responsibilities for crime prevention as an essential element of the law enforcement task, and that they institute improved means of handling citizen complaints and community relationships. Like, God damn, it's just like yesterday, right? Now it happened again in '68, and again a presidential commission found, quote, this is our basic conclusion. Our nation is moving toward 2 societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. In 1992, after the Rodney King riots in LA, white America acted as if it had no idea this was a thing, though. And they said this.
Television has become a medium that often brings us together, but its vivid display of Rodney King's beating shocked us. And the America it has shown us on our screens these last 48 hours has appalled us. None of this is what we wish to think of as American. It's as if we were looking in a mirror that distorted our better selves and turned us ugly. We cannot let that happen. We cannot do that to ourselves.
Yet we keep doing it as if we don't know how many people are killed by the police every year. And actually we don't. No one does. Even if you think you know, you're probably wrong. See, most of the data we see on police killings come from public news reports. The most trusted source, the Washington Post Fatal Force database, only counts shootings by on-duty police officers. So, for instance, George Floyd isn't even listed, and neither is Eric Garner, because they were both choked to death. And Sandra Bland isn't counted, even though she died in police custody. See, neither is 12-year-old Akilah Jackson, because she was killed by a police officer who ran her over in 2019. They also don't count off-duty deaths like Botham Jean's death, because Amber Geiger, she was off-duty. They don't count Natasha McKenna because she was tasered to death. Now, every year, The Roots teams up with Fatal Encounters to do a more accurate count, but it's really labor-intensive and time-consuming. And that's still probably not right. Why? Because police don't have to tell us when they kill someone. And think about this. What about the police brutality victims who don't die? What about the people who were shot and paralyzed for life? What about the people who just get choked unconscious? Who counts those people? Well, no one. And there's a good reason why we don't know how many Americans die at the hands of law enforcement officers. Because the police don't have to tell us. And maybe that's about to change.
CBS News has obtained a rough draft of the law enforcement reform proposal from Republican Senator Tim Scott.
So why is Tim Scott working on police reform? Well, for one, he's the only black Republican in the Senate. And 2, even though Tim Scott is my homeboy and I don't even fuck with him like that, he has been trying to do something about this issue for a long time. In 2014, for the first time in history, the Obama administration tasked the FBI with counting how many arrest-related deaths happened that year. But when the Bureau of Justice Statistics issued its report, it found that the FBI had been underreporting the number of deaths by an average of 545 deaths per year. But that number was wrong too. Since 2015, Tim Scott has been trying to pass the Walter Scott Notification Act. Now, they're not related. The legislation would simply require every law enforcement agency in America to report all police shootings and deaths to the federal government, including the victim's name, race, age, and sex, the officer's name, race, age, and sex, whether the victim was armed or not, a description of the weapon the police used, a detailed description of the event, the finding from law enforcement as to whether or not the shooting was justified or not. Now, Scott tried to pass the proposal as a standalone bill, to no avail. And then when he attempted to attach it to funding legislation, it failed. So, in a last-ditch attempt, as the First Step Act worked its way through the Senate in December 2018, Scott attempted to slide in his idea as an amendment to the bill, but police unions fought it, and once again, the Walter Scott Notification Act fell by the wayside. So, Tim Scott gave up. In 2019, for the first time in 4 years, Tim Scott did not try to introduce the Walter Scott Notification Act as an amendment or as a standalone bill. But now, as the only black Republican in the Senate, they got to do something about these police killings, right? So, of course, the GOP asked the black dude to fix white supremacy. But Tim Scott is black, so he knows. Which begs the question, how the hell would a Walter Scott Notification Act enforce this policy? Well, the provision would basically withhold or withdraw federal funds from any law enforcement agency that didn't report police shootings. Wait, this reminds me of something we already talked about. Hey, Jeremy, show me again what's the definition of defund. To withdraw or withhold funds. Now that's white supremacy. Before police kneeled on George Floyd's neck, before cops shot Breonna Taylor, the only Senate Republican who was willing to advocate for police reform was a black man. And again, I'm not a fan of Tim Scott or the Republican Party, but for years, no one was willing to listen to the black guy, even though he knew there was a police problem, even though for years he tried to tell them what the answer was. And what was his solution? It was the same thing experts have advocated for literally 100 years. Defund the police. Or, as the only attorney general we recognize once described it,
you about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. You about to lose your job. Is this shit worth you losing your job? Because you about to.
May the clapback be with you all. And amen.
Just received in our this is the latest dispatch just received in our news.